Yo, welcome to another Spaceless Realms podcast. Back in this podcast, we'll be talking about DNA and RNA, and also talking about the two sides of the brain and the two sides of the mind, and how they connect with the higher self and intuition in general. So, yeah, my brother Kalki, welcome to the podcast, and let's go into it, brother.
Thank you. Let's do it. I think it's magnificent because, I'm not a neurobiologist. I haven't studied the human brain. I just want to clear that up. I am a PhD and a postdoctoral scholar in interdisciplinary studies, but I'm not an expert in the field, but I do know quite a bit of general syncretic knowledge about those different areas, which is, I mean, many people have some basic knowledge that we don't seem to acknowledge. We're all teachers and students to a certain extent, and we're all eternal students in the school of life. So the idea to me, what it's very interesting to see, first of all, back in the days, they had something called phrenology, where they studied the brain, which was studying the logos, the reason, or the word of phren, the mind. So they had different parts of the brain that they associated with certain supernatural or natural abilities, which was very much kind of almost in an Eastern philosophical sense. It was very abstract compared to what they study now in terms of neural links and the different synaptic and neuronic connections in the brain. But since we can't really talk about that and not being in that area, I think that, like you said, the rational and the irrational side, the left and the right mind, the idea of those two sides are actually connected through something which is related to the RNA, which is the reptilian brain. So our DNA is activated in those ways, the same way that you would look at yin and yang, the same way that there's masculine and feminine, and then there's the in between, which is the non-binary. The reptilian brain, or the middle cortex, is actually a remnant of our reptilian ancestry, which, or of our relation to that part, because we share DNA with species all across the planet. We share about 97 or 98% DNA with pigs. Imagine that, and people eat them. So it's insane because we restructure ourselves genetically on a daily basis, on a quantum level, epigenetically. And epigenetics right now, the way it's studied, explains that most of the defectuous, or the defective qualities, I should say, rather, of the body, the problems we have genetically and otherwise, can be restructured within 2 generations. But I'm a firm proponent that that could be restructured within not only a lifetime, but much quicker than that on a quantum level. And so, talking about activating our DNA, how do we do that? As with the risk to repeat myself, nutrition is quintessential, because we are what we eat. So the DNA that we restructure in our body is directly made from the biochemical processes of transmuting the food, which is, if you're cannibalizing a species that has 97% in common with your DNA, not to mention the bad karma and the vibrational frequency from the death and the decay and the cancer and everything else that's related to that, the 500-600 different diseases you can catch on top of that,
Mm.
you're essentially not diversifying your DNA, and you're stumbling down a devolutionary building block of creation. If you want, you're falling down the wrong path. Whereas if you restructure yourself with superfoods, with spices, with clean water, which is 80% of the body, again, which is super important. I mean, realistically, it's massively magical to think that we have 80% water in our body. We're watery beings. That's the reason why we can heal so quickly. That's one of the reasons why that we're carbon-based life form. We have solid bones, but we have watery blood that functions inside of us, that's held together by skin and muscle and bones as a an endo structure, an endoskeleton, if you want to put it that way.
Mm.
So activating that DNA, super primordial. The more varied of a diet you have, the more complex of a diet, the more complex you will be as a being, the more those plant teacher totems will speak through you. It's like reading from a number of different books, but the books, they're cell generated building blocks of photosynthetic life that absorbs energy from the sun, which is hydrogen, which creates primordial knowledge and melanation, and from the water, which itself is composing our own bodies, but composes the plants too in their photosynthetic processes. Plants are extremely advanced chakric beings, energetic beings that are meditational pillars that purify the air. So you can imagine feeding off of that, actually completely within 6 years on a natural human being basis. We restructure our body genetically entirely. in 6 years, we have not a cell in common with who we are 6 years ago. So the term, you look different actually comes from that idea. When you say somebody says, you've changed, I haven't seen you in 5 or 6 years, the person is completely different. The only thing holding them together is essentially the daily habits and practices that they have of certain types of experiences that they have socially or nutritionally or spiritually, psychically. So activating that starts again with nutrition, with water and everything else, but without repeating myself, also with a pineal gland activation, like you said, that we've talked about that before, the decalcification or decalcifying of the pineal gland,
Mm.
which happens through not using fluoridated products, not using fluoride at the dentist, not drinking fluoridated water, or fluoridated toothpaste. It's massive, the amount of heavy metals and neurotoxins and chemicals. And again, in cigarettes would be the same thing. So the shamanic substances and the plants we put in our body are key to the primal building block of reactivating our DNA. The rest of it goes through what we put in our mind, what we read, what we see, who we spend time with, how we think. And activating, they've proven that freestyle or spontaneous generated conversation or poetry, especially because of the mnemonic retention device of rhyme schemes, can actually activate completely different parts of the brain, which in Indian tradition, when you're in what we were talking about yesterday in terms of Satori, or in Japan, or in India of Samadhi, the states of higher bliss and meditation, the parts of the brain light up in the shape of a great swan that's flapping its wings. And they call that Paramhansa.
Mm. Wait, so you're saying also cigarettes, they have fluoride in cigarettes?
Not fluoride, but they have, I know there's 600 different chemicals. Maybe there's even fluoride in there. Who knows?
That's
600 different
crazy.
chemicals, about as many chemicals as they use to bleach toilet paper
That's
in a
disgusting.
cigarette. It's horrible.
Wow.
I'm surprised they're not selling white tobacco to people, because the
Mhm.
tobacco still looks brown. So you think, well, must be like brown sugar or like brown bread, but no, it's because the tobacco is extremely strong and they're not bleaching the tobacco to give the idea of a natural product to people. But the
Mm.
truth is, it's like having Wonder Bread that's got added whole wheat into it, but then there's tons of chemicals and processes. They use, I know for sure, they use formaldehyde. They
Yeah.
have, which is embalming fluid. They have cyanide in there, which is rat poison. So right off the bat, those two chemicals out of 600 should be enough to tell people, don't put that in your body, because tobacco is supposed to be the grandfather of truth. You use indigenous ceremonial tobacco in your body like I do, or like other people do. And then suddenly you have the voice of truth of the plant teacher totem that's speaking through you. And that's happened to me. I literally ended up making a song the day that I received my Mapacho Wah Aztec tobacco. I made a song in Nahuatl, and I've never pronounced or studied or learned that language in my life. And I made a
Wow.
7-minute song in Nahuatl where even my Nahuatl friends, my Aztec friends, my South American friends were like, can you teach me how to speak Nahuatl? I don't even know how to speak it like you do. And I
Mm.
said, it's the tobacco. Tobacco told me, please learn how to say thank you. I looked at a codex online, and the tobacco told me, no, the codex is wrong. The codex was made by a Spanish conqueror. He's not a good person. He's not aware of what he's doing. He's mistranslating the words. You need to write a new codex and you need to make it into a song. And I made it in like 30 minutes.
Mm.
And then you can imagine a word like Zimo Panolti. How do you pronounce that? It just popped up in my mind. And you look at a letter like Moph, like you wouldn't know how to pronounce that if you have a traditional Latin upbringing in terms of alphabet. But somehow I just knew how to pronounce the words. I rewrote the words, and something said, let's say one of them was Moyolo, Noyolo, and it means my heart is of the rainbow. But the translation in the codex said it means my heart is white. I said, no, that's wrong. The heart is not white when it's happy. It's of the rainbow. So the tobacco told me, that's a mistranslation. Please change the translation. So you can imagine, to me, that's a good firsthand experience. It's a hearsay because I'm saying this. Most people wouldn't know unless they know my music, they know me. And they would still say there's no proof that he didn't study that language. But the truth is, to me, that's it's an anecdotal proof that tobacco is alive and can speak. It spoke its original ancient 1,000-year-old language through me.
Wow. Yeah, that really makes me think like where does knowledge actually come from and where do like thoughts and words actually come from? Like there's so much that goes into what makes up who we are. And really just going deep on the coding of what we are entirely is just crazy how you can change so easily. That's another gift of being human, where you can actually change your life and you can change who you are just by learning different things, experimenting with yourself, learning who you are, learning what you are, and then seeing what how things externally, how those change you. Because then you can kind of maneuver the reality in that way when you can understand how you're being brought down, how your energy and your vibration entirely gets brought down, and also what brings you up. And if you can harmonize more with obviously what brings you up, then you'll obviously be on the path of continually growing over and over.
That's brilliantly put. And to be honest, it made
Yeah,
me
man.
reflect on the nature. That to me, that was a great realization because we are shapeshifters as human. We have shamanic potential.
Yeah.
And as superhumans as well. Shamanic potential brings us into non-binary existence and quantum evolution, and into bridging the seen and the unseen, the rational and the irrational, the masculine, the feminine, the non-binary, the oracular. So it's very interesting because the way you put it, I was like, you're right. You can see someone 10 years later and they look nothing like they did. You don't even
Mhm.
recognize them. But you look at an owl, it's always going to be an owl. The animals don't have the ability to restructure themselves in negative ways because naturally they have prescience, they have intuition, they have supernatural abilities that are part of nature, which allow them to keep their fundamental nature stable.
Hmm. Fundamental natures. I like the way you said that. Huh.
Yeah, like their residual image is extremely stable. Ours, not so much. You see someone who had a bad day and a hangover, the animal's not going to have a bad day and a hangover unless you feed it alcohol and you put it in a zoo or something.
Yeah.
But we could wake up one morning and look like shit. You could be like, beat up, tired, blobby, all of this, and then you take a shower, you take care of yourself, you trim your beard, you do this and that. But the animals will always look like themselves.
Hmm.
So it's a great gift, but it can be a curse if we don't use it properly.
I like the way you said that. Yeah, like with more power comes more responsibility, as they say. So like of course
Yeah,
as you yeah, you just realize more the deeper that you go, the bigger that the picture gets. Um, just changing the topic entirely, I wanted to speak about how the human being changes shifts from like day version to like night version. Like a lot of people during the night, you drift more into your subconscious mind. And that's why people struggle being alone a lot, just being alone at night specifically, because you're alone with the subconscious mind. And like during the day, you're kind of just on the go with things and like you're feeling like the fresh energy of a regenerated day. But then as that energy fades and then you kind of go into an older version of yourself because you're getting more tired and then your subconscious mind is being more brought to the surface, you could say. Let's talk more about that, how the shift takes place, and then also talk more about the subconscious mind.
I'd say that fits right in with what you're explaining, the way you described it, especially because it has to do with bridging the rational and the irrational, day and night, yin and yang, masculine,
Mm,
feminine. It has to do with seeing why. And I think, like you said, you revert to an older state because you revert to a more primal state where suddenly you're like going back even in a womb position sometimes when you're sleeping, or you're going back to a more youthful version of yourself. You go into a dream realm which is irrational. You go into a world where anything is possible, but then when they fluoridate your brain, you put heavy metals and everything else, if your pineal gland isn't functioning properly, then your dream realm might be full of nightmares. You might be
mm,
stuck there feeling unempowered. You might be feeling scared, and fear of the dark, I think, is a big part of why people are afraid of nighttime, where some people are night owls and function in darkness. That's why one of the latest albums I made is called We Are of the Noche, We Are of the Night, because I'm not afraid of the dark in that sense. I mean, it's possible that you can be in some situations. Put me in a bad dark alley in a mental institution or something, I'd probably be panicking. But at the same time, I probably wouldn't, because I'd be like, you know what? I've been through some shit like this. I can survive this. But I think we revert to a more primal, maybe infantilized state when we're in, most people, when we're in nighttime mode, especially if we're sleeping, because the brain, when it's starting to shift into the unconscious, is going into the realm of the unknown and into the unlimited realm. So if we're not careful at being balanced during the day, we have these residues of the imprints and the food and the chemicals and the contamination, the social interactions and everything else, which jumbles into this kind of a lottery ticket of the unconscious, giving us these dreams related to what we've put in our bodies, who we've talked to, what we've watched on TV, the disruptive frequencies of technology. And we can be very vulnerable in that state.
Mm.
So I think it fits very well. Balancing both of those is again the what we've talked about earlier is quintessential to actually have a good dream state. And then when you have the good dream state, you have better rest. You wake up in the morning and your next day is going to be even better.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like the way I see it, the way that we're transitioning into the future, it seems like things are going to be a lot more simple than they used to be. But also that's life being more simple comes with more time to make more, just do more things in the first place. Like with more freedom, you have more possible algorithms that become present with more time. You know what I mean? Like when you have more
Mm-hmm.
time, then you can do more things, but then doing more things that also comes with more action and reaction kind of consequences. So that's where like good wisdom and good knowledge actually comes into play in this area. Because if you're just running around the reality, like say if someone like gave you a lot of money and then you were just running around the reality, but your mind is still just in a completely unhealed state, then you're only just gonna be like causing havoc everywhere. But if you're actually in balance and in harmony and you're able to just connect with the world in that way and connect with the reflection of your inner state, then it's only growth from there. That's the way I
And
see it.
ironically, what you would probably do with that amount of money, if you were really connected to your inner state, is you would donate most of it to something like Cuso International or to like a nonprofit indigenous grassroots based organization that would distribute it to people who needed it the most, because you'd
Yeah.
realize the money is a centralized form of corrupted energy. So
Yeah.
I've done that
Hmm.
lots in my life. I've donated millions of dollars to nonprofits. And I don't say that to brag, but I say that so people realize how important it is to give back to people who truly need it. We don't need a $50 steak meal. We don't even need a $2 steak meal. We don't need any of the stuff that we're spending most of our money on. So to me, I've spent most of my life donating large amounts of money to different organizations, to the point where Cuso International, I had the daughter of Mel Gibson call me 6 times, literally for some weird reason. And she's a good person. Like, it has nothing to do with Mel Gibson, but like, like she called me 6 times to thank me and told me I was one of the biggest donors in Canada for Cuso International. I believe she's she might be a niece or something, but like, anyways, it was very very interesting because I was like, wow. And I was like, what do you mean I'm one of the biggest donors? And she's like, well, you just donated like $6,000 last month. I was like, yeah, but that's $6,000. It's not. She's like, you'd be surprised. Most multimillionaires don't even donate. Like if they do, they donate 100 here or 1,000 there. But she's like, you're one of the biggest donors we have in Canada, and you're one of the most regular ones.
Wow. Ah, man, respect to you. That definitely, I don't know, it's just doing things out of like unconditional love and just doing things for the better good. You,
Exactly.
yeah, you just don't expect like a thank you or anything like that. You just do it out of the purity of your
But
heart.
even if people are not doing it for that reason, at least they're doing it. That's what I would say. A lot of people say, don't do it if you're not going to do it for the right reasons. I'd say, do it anyways. If somebody is about to get hit by a bus and you're like, I'm not really motivated, you should do it anyways. If somebody is dying somewhere and you're like, well, I don't have pure intentions, I want to get good karma from this, so I might as well
Yeah.
not donate anything, then you're kind of fucked.
Hmm. Yeah, actually, you just said like if someone was like about to actually get hit by a car and you were there, if you were like, that's where your fight or flight kicks in, where like
Yeah.
your body moves before you can even think. And in a way, that's also kind of like the flow state in a way. So like, mm, yeah, talk more about that and how that fight or flight adrenaline rush actually kicks in the first place.
You know what's very interesting? I have a song I wrote not too long ago where I said, fight or flight is a binary option. I choose both.
Mm.
So I choose fight and flight, but in a way where flight, I would say I'd play on the word and say I choose to fly in the ethers and fight as well. So I choose to be a dreamer and a warrior. I choose to battle the forces of evil, but still know when I need to retreat. So the binary option of fight or flight would be like, choose, do you want to live in daytime all the time, or do you want to live in nighttime all the time? But then people might say, where's the option C? I want to live in both. So I think it's extremely important to know when to fight, when to be in flight mode, but then realize that flight mode doesn't mean fear. It doesn't mean you're running away from something. It just might mean you recognize the obstacle is just too much at the moment.
Mm.
If you're driving, like that's the good example. I've happened to be in a situation when I was driving across Canada or across the continent, I should say. And I got to the US border accidentally by taking a wrong road. Now,
Mm.
the first thing I did as soon as I realized and saw the border guards coming up was like, I'm not going to be like, oh, it's too late. I'm driving up. I might as well tell them. I pulled a U turn and I'm like, I'm out of there. So that was like knowing when to get out. It's a stupid example, but it's a good example to show. At that point, I'm like, if I drive up to the border guards and I'm like, oh, sorry, I just took a wrong turn, they'll be like, sir, can I see your papers? And then I'm like, I don't have any. And they'd be like, okay, we're calling the blah, blah, blah. This guy was trying to illegally get into the US, da, 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 da. So you have to know when you're bested in a situation where it's too overwhelming. You're like, there's too many factors playing against me right now. I need to get out of here.
Yeah, knowing when to retreat, that's definitely very wise.
Yeah. And one thing that's interesting that's kind of related to that, I would say really quickly, is The Art of War, Sun Tzu.
Mm.
Sun Tzu said, it's a translation, but I think it's an accurate translation. Appear weak to your enemies. So flight in a wise situation can actually appear weak to some people, but even appearing weak can be beneficial. And at first I was like, why would you appear weak to your enemies? It's because it's an alpha macho male thing to appear strong all the time, but it's a front. Whereas when you appear weak to your enemies and they realize how strong you actually are, it's always a benefit for them to think you're weaker than you are. Because if they undermine you, if they size you up, but they think you're not that dangerous, you're not that much of a threat to them, or you're not that worthy of a warrior or an opponent, that's great for you. If somebody walks into an MMA ring and thinks my opponent's so weak, and the opponent goes, but they're just doing that just you appear weak to your enemy, that's great, because as soon as they try to attack you thinking how weak you are and you pounce back 10 times stronger than they expected, they're not ready for that.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, like my grandparents always told me to always think ahead and just expect every outcome. So then that you just learn from life as you go along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very true. Or even to give a good example, um, they show in a lot of MMA self-defense videos. I've seen many videos like that, and I've used that many times, a tactic which appears to be flight. You pretend that you're afraid, or you pretend that you're going away, but then you turn around and hook them in the head as soon as they've attacked you. So they attack you, you go, oh no, oh no, boom.
Yeah.
Or like, or even put a hand up like you're pretending that you don't want any trouble, but with your other hand you punch them, or you disable, like say like do a bear paw, or you grab, like hit the neck or something, or you punch them in the stomach. When you put your hand up, they focus on the hand upwards, punch the stomach.
Hmm.
Anyways, this is getting more into like a fight kind of thing. Like, but I think it's
Well,
interesting because self-defense is very important in this
oh
world where
yeah,
there's so much patriarchal abuse, so many women being raped, children getting abused, molested. So I think it's very important to know how to defend ourselves physically as well.
definitely. How to defend yourself physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because the same way that there's so much like distortion here, there's also distortion in the more spiritual realms as well. Like there's still malevolent forces as you go in higher dimensions. So it's important to be able to guide yourself in that way and have that shield and sword at the same time as you climb into higher dimensions because you still have to protect yourself in that way. So you don't have any astral parasites climbing on you in that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That was very smart. To me, the shield that I choose double swords and no shield. But my shield is my force field, is my energy. In Qigong, the great masters say, or the great mistresses, the great masters, the great beings that study Qigong is a Venusian art, which is very peaceable. But it's the ultimate martial art to me because in Qigong, in true Qigong philosophy, you have no opponent, you have no enemy. And once you get to the realization that you're all interconnected and that your energy and their energy flow from the same source, even if they have evil intentions, they cannot harm you. A Qigong master was so powerful in this YouTube demonstration that he got a martial arts black belt level 7 trying to attack him. And he explained how his force field was so strong that while he was explaining to the crowd that the martial arts master would try to attack him, he would jump kick at his head. He would move his hand a foot away from the leg hitting him, and the energy from his force field from the hand made the foot twist sideways and he missed his kick and he was jumping straight for the head.
That's crazy.
So that's
Yeah.
extremely advanced. That is like literally like that's essentially extrasensory perception. That's using telekinesis to reshift the energetic field by, and he was explaining how he believed that this was not his enemy, that he had no enemy, there no harm would come to him, but his energy was so strong that he was calmly explaining to the crowd, and this was an older man, calmly explaining to the crowd why he couldn't be hit. And the guy tried to punch him and he'd go, ooh, and he'd like his arm would deflect sideways, and you could see like almost see the force field the way he was punching. He couldn't. And I've seen that happen to me in certain fights as well too. Somebody, even just a good example of that on a more rational level, when somebody just is like, they want to punch you, but they can't because
Hmm.
you're confident, your aura is strong, your energy is dominant. They don't know how to punch you because you're fearless. As soon as you're afraid, your energetic, it's a lower vibrational frequency, your energetic field becomes weaker, your toroidal force field, spurring from the sunyatadara chakra, from the 0 point chakra, and going up to the crown chakra, the fontanella. That's what replenishes the toroidal force field of energy. The more dominant, and not dominant necessarily, but the more confident, the more fearless you are, the stronger your force field will be. And then when they go, they want to punch you, but if you're not scared of them, they can't. The
Hmm.
same thing with animals in the wild. They won't attack you if you're fearless.
Hmm. Yeah, the most powerful things are unseen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and completely changing the topic, I wanted to talk about actually it's not really changing the topic, but it's just stemming from it and how if you were to speak with your great 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 grandpa, you would say like this big burly guy and just like the presence and strength that he has is just unmatchable. I wanted to talk about how
I
the
thought about him and I know who that is. That's funny.
yeah, and like talking about the ancestors in general. The way I see it is a lot of the ancestors' stories got corrupted in a way. So we don't really know the real truth of our origins. So go deeper about that. Talk about our origins.
Very interesting, because the first thing that popped up in my mind is I know I'm a relative, going back a lot further. I know I'm a relative to Genghis Khan, but 95% of the planet, as we've said before, is related to Genghis Khan in one way or another. But if I talk to Genghis Khan, who was probably maybe not a big burly man, but was an extremely powerful warrior,
Mm,
that would be very interesting. I would be curious to know what would happen, and I would have a lot of flashbacks. I think I would get a lot of flashbacks from past lives. But the one I first thought about, because I have Romanian bloodlines, which I'm sure you might be familiar with, somebody that they've misinterpreted as being, like you said, a very bloodthirsty figure, is Vlad the Impaler. Uh,
mm.
so that's one of my relatives. And I pictured Vlad in my head was supposed to be about 7 foot something, with a giant broadsword, like this huge, burly, like, you know, beastly, powerful man. But then I was like, he would look at me, and he told me before in my dreams that I was like a younger cousin or a sibling to him, that I was like a little, like a smaller, smaller warrior version of a cousin or like a relative to him, and that he would treat me much like he would like a little brother or like an offspring, that he would be. So I would learn immensely from that, from being around a warrior that size. But at the same time, I would also say I know that we have advantages over people like that. Like somebody who's big and burly and tough, they're not necessarily going to win the fight, because we have agility, we have speed, we have dexterity, we have reflexes that are faster. Look at someone like Bruce Lee. Vlad the Impaler would never want to fight someone like Bruce Lee, even if he had a giant sword and Bruce Lee was bare hand. Bruce Lee would probably dance around him and touch all the, like, hit all the pressure points and get him dropped down. So strength is not always necessarily, but the ancestral presence is very important.
Mm. What do you know about pressure points and like pressure points in the body?
Very little. Um, I know a couple of them that are very important. I know two in particular that are on the side of the neck. Now, this is something I would say to anyone who has, there are two nerves. They're not really pressure points, but you can apply pressure on those points. So
Mm,
there's two side nerves. If you press on the back of your neck like this, you would feel that it tenses you up. Now, if you press hard enough, you can black out someone from the pain. And so, if anyone is ever in a situation, especially for women, queer people, for if you can reach the neck of your opponent and you can pretend, like in the fight or flight situation, that you're friendly. Say a woman is about to get assaulted or harassed, is getting harassed by a man in a bar or a person in a bar. Usually it's a man assaulting a woman or harassing a woman. She can say, "Hey, big boy, and kind of rub his neck or something," but then suddenly grab the pressure point and go, "Don't touch me."
mm.
And
Yeah.
the guy will go, "Oh, drop it, stop." And then suddenly she put him in a position of inferiority. So she appeared
Mm.
weaker to him. She used seduction, maybe, or an illusion of seduction to do that. But then, or if you even have a little bit more time for reflex, if you do a chop, like a karate chop on both sides, you
Mm.
can black out someone instantly from that.
Wow. Yeah, like talking about females and males, like I've seen and met a lot of girls who are a lot stronger than a lot of guys who I've met.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
yes.
my own partner Imani is a lot stronger than I am with her legs. My
Mm.
arms might be a bit stronger than hers, because I do a lot of sword training. When you flip shotgun weight machetes, eventually your forearms get pretty strong.
Oh yeah.
But her legs, she can leg lock me. Her legs are about the same size as mine, but no contest. She's leg locked me a couple of times when we're wrestling, and I'm like, I can't move. I'm like,
Wow. Yeah, actually my aunt and my uncle are both bodybuilders and they've had so much years of experience in bodybuilding. And kind of from 3 years ago, that's when I started getting more into weightlifting, and definitely like the fitness aspect of life changed my whole perspective on life in general, because I noticed how much I could put pressure on my mind, but then keep going through the pressure and keep going through the pain, then come out on the other side stronger. So just having that mindset, I became like insanely strong. And I used to be like very, very skinny and no muscle or anything like that. Then I really just went very hard with it for like 2 years straight, came out as a whole different person on the other side. And yeah, man, it's just life changing. Like fitness in
You're
general.
turning into a real life Wolverine, you
Bro,
know?
yeah, bro, for real.
As Wolverines are wily, man. You do not want to mess with a Wolverine. I know because that's my birth name. So I'm like, but I became more like Legion. So I feel like I turned into an MMA version of myself. Like I feel like you're
Mhm.
more on the wild, like you're much more disciplined. I'm wilder and more chaotic in some senses, but I'm more on the I would say like I feel like you'd be more of like an indigenous warrior in an organic sense, and I'd be more of like an MMA fighter covered in tattoos. Like I
Mm,
have a little bit different style. I feel like that if you saw both of us fighting, you'd probably do it much more intuitively than me.
mm, hmm. Yeah, just give me a few years. I'll see what I transition to in a few years. Yeah. Yeah, because
I've had
especially
so many dreams about talking about the dream realm and activating your higher self. I've had so many dreams about like MMA fights. I used to be in fight pits and electrified rings. And like, imagine you wake up in a dream, you're in an electrified fight to the death with a bunch of macho men. And
dude.
there's like, I got to a point where I was so good in my dreams that like, I'd get to my dreams, I'd fall asleep, and I'm like, okay, this time, ding, ding, ding. Sometimes I'd even hear the bells ringing, and I'd wake up like kind of like Nightcrawler in the X-Men when he's in that fight to the death in the death cage, and I'd be like, okay. They'd be like, okay, this is your opponent. He's like 6'5" and he's like 280 pounds, and I was like, send in two more.
Oh my goodness. That's crazy,
But
man.
most people would be terrified. They'd be like, a
Yeah.
lot of people would be like, I was stuck in an electrified ring and these big macho men were attacking me. I was like, bring some more. Let's do it.
Did you see like when you were in that astral plane, how much your strength actually was magnified in that realm?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
very much because I cheat sometimes because Legion has
Mm.
like, if you've studied a bit, the X-Men, Legion is Professor X's son. He's a lot of super. He's one of the most powerful mutants in the Marvel universe. So in my dreams, I could fly. Sometimes I would cheat. I'd lift up and start flying in the ring and then drop back down and beat the shit out of them. So like I had psychic abilities. I was able to like trick them with my mind. I was able to like, and I had crazy MMA training abilities that are amplified in my dream. Like I could literally get dropped from a punch, fall on the ground, start twitching, and then when they start counting, they'd be at like 5 or 6. I'd mess with people in my dreams. They'd be like 5, 6, 7, 8, and then at 9, I'd like throw myself up, jump up, and then pop back on my legs, like drop straight, standing up on my legs at 9, and they'd be like, okay, like, and then I literally knock them right the fuck out.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Oh, it's super dope. Like just
Yeah.
2 days ago, I just had a dream about flying around, fighting fighter jets and Black Hawk helicopters, and like they were shooting at me and they couldn't kill me.
Mm.
So it's fun. Dreams are amazing. It's like being in your own movie, but you have to unlock the key to that. And that I would say again, it's like everything we've talked about, all the different podcasts. We explain all the different aspects of nutrition being the most essential, water being the most essential, pineal gland decalcification. But once you get to that level, it's like you've unlocked a cheat code in a video game and you can do anything.
Mm. Yeah, truly unlimited potential, unlimited growth, just infinite possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. All right, well, let's end off the podcast there. Thank you for the space, my brother.
Yo, that sounds perfect.
Yeah, that
Yo,
was
likewise.
beautiful.
It's been an absolute pleasure as always. Peace.